Good evening and welcome to the Hoosier Huddle podcast. I'm Sammy Jacobs. Along with me is T.J. Inman. First, we want to tell our listeners happy Thanksgiving. This is being recorded on Wednesday, the night before, but should come out if you're listening to it on Thursday. Happy Thanksgiving. And hopefully, you're not watching IU basketball because they're going to get their butts kicked by Gonzaga on Thursday after getting manhandled on Wednesday by Louisville. But we have a lot of football stuff to talk about.
Yeah.
TJ, let's first check in. How are you doing? How did you take the Ohio State loss? And
Yeah.
we'll get into
So,
college football playoff.
right. There's two different ways that mentally I've approached the Ohio State game. One is, man, if it wasn't for those uncharacteristic special teams mistakes, giving Ohio State 14 points, that would have been a lot closer. And that's a fact. That's true. It would have. But then I also know what I watched and Indiana's failure to protect Curtis Rourke, keep the offense in any kind of rhythm for much of that game, really after the first drive.
Yeah,
Um,
outside of their first and their last drive, there was no offensive rhythm.
right. So I know what I watched, and then I'm like, yeah, I mean, those special teams turnovers, or mistakes, that's true, but that was not a competitive game. Um, I,
No, and then you had a chance to
Indiana's defense should not
kept
be
them in the
lumped
game.
in with that. They did a nice job, particularly against Ohio State's running game. You take away that Travion Henderson run up the middle for 39 yards at the end of the game. You take that away, which I understand that counts. It happened, but you take that away, and Ohio State is, I believe, under three. I know they're under 3 yards a carry, and I think their yardage would have been, was it two?
It would have been under 300 for sure. I
I
don't know if
think
it
it
would
was
have
like
been under 250.
255.
Yeah.
Something like 255 sounds right, but well under 300 yards before that last drive. So I think Indiana's defense deserves a lot of credit. They didn't get much pressure on Will Howard, which I was mildly surprised by. I thought that would be something IU could do, but they did great containing him in the pocket. They did great stopping Judkins and Henderson from getting going. Uh, I thought that they did a good job tackling in the secondary. Didn't really let Ohio State's weapons get loose for any big yards after the catch.
No.
Uh, Will Howard had success accuracy wise, but IU didn't give up a lot of explosive plays. They forced him to be methodical, and Ohio State took that and did a good job with it. And I think Ohio State knew relatively early in like the second quarter uh, that they had figured out what to do against Indiana's offense, and I think they felt comfortable that if they could get a bit of a lead, that they'd be able to keep Indiana down. Uh, Now, they didn't plan on that coming in the form of a dropped punt and a punt return for a touchdown, which is something Ohio State had not had in a very long time. Um,
It's 2014 when they
yeah,
played IU and
right.
um, Jalen Marshall took over that game.
Yep. So they didn't plan on it coming that way. Um, but I don't think that Ohio State felt like they had to take a lot of chances on offense because their defense had that game in hand. Um, so overall, I think there were positives for Indiana. There were the uncharacteristic negatives that you don't really worry about carrying over necessarily, given what IU's done throughout the season. And then there was the continuing trend of the offense being out of rhythm and unable to block against a blitz. So those are kind of the takeaways for me. And as we head into the regular season finale, that's definitely something to watch is can IU's offense get back into rhythm? Can they figure out how to block against this defensive pressure that's really causing Indiana problems with the interior blitz is kind of where it seems like a lot of the problems are coming from. Slight delayed blitzes, mixing up pressures to confuse IU's offensive line. And I don't know if Indiana's missing Drew Evans that much, or if it's a case of they're just unable to pick up the pressure and they'd be having these problems even with Drew Evans. I don't know which of them is reality. Um, but we're left with Curtis Rourke is feeling the pressure on most dropbacks now. It prevents Indiana from stretching the field vertically because Rourke does not feel comfortable taking the time to let that type of play develop. And IU's coaching staff has got to figure out a way this week to figure out how to deal with it. Of course, Purdue's personnel is not going to have the athleticism or the skill of Ohio State and Michigan. That's definitely part of it. That Ohio State and Michigan have really good players,
Yep.
and that's part of what's causing IU's offensive line these problems. But
Yeah,
I think
and they
some of it
timed up
is
I,
scheme.
in the post game. They said Ohio State started to time up the silent count,
Yeah.
and I think what they were doing was one of the guards would slap the side of the center to snap it, and
Yep.
there was no differentiation in it. And once you time it up, those guys were too quick to make up the extra step.
They were
Um,
having an impossible time blocking the linebacker blitz up the middle. It was something that they really, once Ohio State started sending that pressure with Simon, Indiana failed to pick it up
yeah,
and they failed to adjust. Um, as we kind of pivot to what did it mean for the college football playoff rankings, those came out Tuesday. Indiana dropping from
five to
we were
10.
the fifth ranked to 10th ranked, and from the seventh seed to the 11th seed
Yep.
is where Indiana currently sits heading into the last regular season week of the season. Of course, that's remarkable, amazing to be there, but
It's not a great spot.
it does leave. It's not quite as simple as,
Winning
oh,
you're
if
in.
we beat Purdue, we're definitely in. Probably, but it's certainly not for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely a not a simple win and you're in. It's win and probably get help. And I think, and we talked about this
And how you
yesterday,
win,
TJ.
how you
Yes, it
win.
is. It is the IU needs style points. They need to at least cover the spread, if not win by more. I think one of our followers on Twitter said this needs to be like one of those Joe Tiller beatdowns when IU was bad. Um, so it really needs to. The game I'm watching that I'm concerned about is the Clemson South Carolina game, which is right down the road from UTJ.
Yeah.
Um, South Carolina's come out of basically nowhere, three-loss SEC team, now ranked 15th. Clemson is ranked 12th,
Yep.
but are not in the field because Arizona State jumps everybody.
Right.
Um, they're 9-2 and in that 12 spot. It's I think Clemson jumps in if they win and the ACC might become a two-bid league, but you might get that three-loss SEC team in South Carolina if they go in and beat
Well,
Clemson too.
so Clemson jumping in makes the ACC a three-bid league,
Yes, I forgot about SMU.
right? Unless you then say, okay, we will punish the loser of the ACC championship game. So it would be Clemson jumping in, and let's say SMU loses to Miami uh, in a competitive game. Does SMU then take their second loss and get dropped out of the field from number 9? Let's say that they beat Cal this weekend, right, and stay at number 10 in the rankings and the 9 seed, and then go to the ACC championship game against Miami and get blown out. Well, I think then you would have grounds to say, okay, their strength of schedule wasn't great. They didn't play Miami. They didn't play Clemson in the regular season. And when they did get a chance against one of those two, they got blown out. And treat them like Indiana and drop them, 5 or 6 spots. Okay, what if that's a competitive game though? Then do you punish them and say, yeah, but now you have a second loss and your strength of record, your strength of schedule is still not great. We don't know. We don't know how
Yeah,
they'll handle that, right? So it
especially
gives,
since it's an extra game that's not on the
right,
schedule. That's
that
your
that they have said they place importance on making a conference championship game, and that they have said they will not punish conference championship game losers because they want those games to still mean something. And if you start punishing teams for playing in it, then teams might not want to play in it. Now,
Yep.
the committee says a lot of things. We don't really know what they're going to stick to and what they're not going to stick to. Um, don't know, but it does open the door for 3 ACC teams to get in. I have a hard time believing that that's ultimately what happens. It's not a good league. I watch a ton of ACC football being here in Clemson. Um, I think if you look at Clemson's resume, boy, blown out against Georgia in the season opener.
Yep.
Okay, not that's at the time you thought, well, Georgia's awesome. Well, I mean, Georgia has 2 losses, but okay, still, they're one of the better teams in the country. All right, home loss to Louisville in a game that they were not competitive in. That
Nope.
was not a pretty game for Clemson. Um, Louisville, I'm not sure where exactly they're ranked,
They're
but
not ranked.
okay. So that's a non-ranked loss at home. Their best win right now is either at Virginia Tech
Who's terrible.
or at Pittsburgh with backup quarterback Nate Yarnell, and that was a game that Clemson trailed with under 2 minutes to go and needed a 50-yard touchdown run from Cade Klubnik to win that game, which they got. They did get that, and they won that game. And Clemson had a lot of injuries in that game as well. But um, I look at their resume and I say, well, okay, why? But if they beat South Carolina, that becomes their best win, and they're already right there, 1 spot behind Indiana. So they
Yep.
would add their best win of the season, and Indiana would have a win over
Purdue.
maybe the Power Four's worst team added to their resume.
Yeah.
So that's where the concern comes in. Things that IU fans would be rooting for to get a little bit of wiggle room would be uh, Cal over
You.
SMU,
Yep.
USC over Notre Dame.
Yep.
I'm not convinced Notre Dame would drop all the way out, but still, it would give you wiggle room there.
Yep.
Um,
Vandy over Tennessee. Georgia Tech over Georgia.
yeah,
You need Miami to, or who does SMU plays? Cal.
Cal.
You said
Yep.
Cal over
And
SMU.
that's, I believe, a 10 or 11 point spread. Vanderbilt and Tennessee is right about the same. That's in Nashville, but there'll be a ton of Tennessee fans there. Um, uh, Georgia and Georgia Tech is a much larger spread. Notre Dame and South or USC, I think, was 7.5. So that one, you know, certainly could happen. And then a big one is you want Texas to just get rid of the possibility of Texas A&M getting the SEC's auto bid. They
Yeah.
could do that by beating Texas at home this week, a game that's a blood rivalry right there. Anything can happen in that one. Um, and then if they win that game, the Aggies, they would be in the SEC championship game against Georgia and would have a chance to play themselves into the field despite having 3 losses. So you'd want Texas to just get rid of A&M, take care of that possibility, and then one of those other upsets to happen. And then if you handled Purdue, you'd be in, period.
Yeah. The good thing is that The bucket game is at 7 o'clock, and a lot of these games will have taken place or at least be underway,
Yes.
and you know your things. But let's get into the bucket game. IU Purdue at 7 o'clock on Saturday. It's going to be a freezing cold one in Bloomington on Saturday. But the bucket hasn't. IU hasn't won the bucket game since 2019. They've lost three in a row now, and it's looking like it should head back to Bloomington. But again, it's a rivalry game. We've seen bad Purdue teams come in before and beat good IU teams. Um, there's a lot on the line here, and this is a game. And I think we talked about it earlier, TJ. Indiana, it needs to be a get right game for Indiana. The offense hadn't looked good in 6 quarters.
Right.
Um,
Minus a
they
couple of
sh
drives. Yeah.
Yeah, minus a couple drives, but for the most part of 6 quarters,
Yeah.
the second half against Michigan, first, the whole game against Ohio State, they need to get back to looking like they did, the first 9 games of the season and the first half of Michigan. They should be able to do that. Purdue's defense is giving up a ton of explosive plays. They've given up 12 plays over 40 yards. They give up a ton of rushing yards on the ground. Or if Indiana's not comfortable throwing the ball in the cold, or Curtis Rourke's not getting protected, they could hand the ball off 60 times and win this game by 5 touchdowns if they wanted to. Um, that's just, I think that's just how bad Purdue is. You're also looking at there's a lot of extenuating circumstances around Purdue. Now, the reports from Sports Illustrated and some other sites is that it is trending towards Ryan Walters returning. Now, after covering a coaching change at IU last year, we heard a ton of stuff on Tom Allen, especially over the last month of the year,
Yeah.
that he was returning, he wasn't returning. It's trending this way, it's trending that way. But his job security is definitely in question. And is it, hey, let's give the coach one more hurrah before he's out of here? Or is it like, whatever, man, he stinks. It's 20 degrees. Let's just
Get me
get
out of
out of
here.
here.
Yeah.
Get me out of here. So,
Yeah.
what's you did the matchup to watch? What's your take on Purdue?
Yeah. I certainly did not plan on having a matchup to watch. Remain, protect Curtis Rourke, but I feel like it has to be.
Yeah, I thought you
Um,
said the same the same article from last
we
week, but no.
we have to see whether or not the Indiana offensive staff, the Indiana offensive line, Curtis Rourke himself, the play calling, we have to see what adjustments have been made to better protect Curtis Rourke, keep out of those negative plays, and keep the offense in rhythm. Um, I think that the biggest issue for Indiana has been a combination of playing really good defenses and really good defensive fronts and having a hard time communicating interior blitzes as an offensive line unit or as running backs. I thought the running backs did a really bad job of blocking against Ohio State when they've been excellent in that area all season. And again, we don't know game plan and scheme for that, so that could have been that they were asked to do something different. But to my eyes, that part of the game did not look good for them. Um, I thought that Lawton and Ellison ran really well, but struggled in pass blocking, as everybody else did as well.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's going to be, hey, let's run some more quick slants and test Purdue's tackling in the secondary, which is not good. Let's run some bubble screens. Let's run some halfback slip screens. I don't know, but something that is going to help get the offense into rhythm and stay out of those negative plays. Purdue, unlike Ohio State and Michigan, who were, top 10 in the country in sack rate, Purdue is down in the 80s for sack percentage. They are at less than 0.5% of what Ohio State was. Ohio State's up there around 10. Purdue is about 5.3 on sack percentage. Um, you mentioned the running defense. That's an area that Indiana should be able to gash Purdue pretty consistently. They give up over 5 yards a carry, and it's been pretty consistent all season that they've had a hard time defending the run. They've given up an average passer rating of over 160. Just there's not a whole lot of positives for the Purdue defense. So this is one just in terms of personnel, IU should be able to get right on offense. But I think we'll be able to tell whether or not the offensive line has been able to make any successful adjustments against the blitzes because Purdue is going to blitz. They're
Yeah,
going to throw everything that they can at Indiana. It's going to be trick plays. It's going to be, Matt Weaver mentioned this on his podcast as well, and he's correct. He wouldn't be shocked to see a couple onside kicks. Every trick play that they've got in their playbook, they really don't have anything to lose. Nothing.
no,
Nothing at all.
they're the
Aggressive,
opposite.
go for it on fourth downs. I mean, why
The,
not?
the, yeah, they're. Let's switch to the offensive side of the ball and talk about that on the trick plays too.
Yeah,
Purdue, they I still think they have some talent on offense
they do. Yeah.
With Devin Mockabee at running back, Max Clare at wide receiver, and then Hudson Card at quarterback. And we saw what Hudson Card could do to if you can't tackle him, he could pick you apart. And that was IU's problem last year in the bucket game. They got to him like 15 times and
Ugh,
just couldn't
nightmare.
tackle him. But Purdue has played two quarterbacks this year with Ryan Brown too. He's also more of a running threat as a quarterback. You could
Yeah.
see him in there. Um, Maybe some packages for him, maybe some trick plays with him. But this is a one where if you get after Card and can make him uncomfortable and bring him down to the ground, they only throw the ball to Max Clare, it seems.
Yes.
At least that's what the numbers dictate. He's had 14 catches over the last two games. When they need a play, they're going to go to him. And if it's not him, it's Devin Mockabee. So they're a little bit dangerous on offense. But IU, this isn't Ohio State where if you double Jeremiah Smith, Amika Buka, or Carnell Tate are there
Yeah.
too. They're not good,
No.
and they're 1-10 for a reason. But they do have some talent, and it is a rivalry game. And like you said, they have nothing to lose, and IU has everything to lose. Um,
You mentioned Max Clare and you named him as a wide receiver, which
he's a
he's
tight end.
listed as a tight end, but you're right. He's
Yeah,
basically a wide receiver. That
he's
is
kind
how
of
they
like
treat
Colston.
him.
It's kind of like Colston Loveland.
That's a good comparison for sure in terms of he's going to get the lion's share of their targets. Going into last week's game, and I did not look at the numbers after last week's game, but going into last week, Max Clare had the fourth highest target percentage for his team of any player in the Big Ten. So what that means is number one, Max Clare is good. He is a good player. He's a good player. He's a guy that I am fairly certain other teams are already talking to, trying to get him to look
Oh,
for
they
greener
even mentioned
pastures.
they even mentioned that on the broadcast
Oh, did
against
they?
Michigan State. They
Yeah,
said the announcer said Max Clare's a good tight end. It's a type of player that Purdue might have trouble hanging on to.
yeah, yeah, and
Which
and that's absolutely true. I'm sure.
Yeah,
Um,
I just found it ridiculous to say on the air, but
yeah, well,
that's the day and age that we're in. But
yeah,
yeah, he's a
that's a
guy who
combination. It's a combination of Claire being talented and a combination of their receivers not proving much so far this year.
no, they
Um,
don't have their other receivers. Uh, was it Jemai Edrin, 23 catches, 365 yards. Jerron Tibbs, sophomore, 25
yeah,
catches. Nobody else is above 20. Devin Mockabee is at 17. Everybody else is at 12 or below. They don't
Morissette
have,
Morissette played a little bit more against Michigan State, and I cannot pronounce his first name, Denilan or Denilan Morissette. He played most of the second half against Michigan State and was a little bit promising as a young player there. He's a sophomore, but there's just not a whole lot. Their game plan is give the ball to Maccabee, occasionally give it to Reggie Love. I thought he would do more there, but it just hasn't gone his way. Um, and then throw to Max Clare. Their offensive line should have a very hard time against IU's defensive front and pressure.
Yeah.
And you mentioned last year Indiana got the Hudson Card and did not bring him down. He can make plays out of the pocket if you don't wrap him up. IU's got to finish the play on
Yep.
defense. And obviously not allow Hudson Card to make plays outside the pocket when things break down. Um, I think your defensive focus is certainly get to Card, finish the play, and prevent him from finding Max Clare consistently. Because Clare's the guy that can move the chains. And if there's one thing Purdue's going to want to do, it's going to be
Shorten the
control
game.
that time of possession, shorten
Yep.
the game, shorten the number of possessions, keep Indiana on the sideline on offense and get them frustrated. That's one way to keep an offense out of rhythm is not let them be on the field. And Max Clare plus Devin Maccabee are their really only two methods of getting that done.
Yeah. And this is the game we talked about it. Style points are going to matter for the college football playoff.
Right.
IU's offense is, and I know, freaking Greg Doyle pointed out that Ohio State was running up the score and it was like, get over it. Sig said what he said, and they took it personally. And it, what was it? Michael Irvin said it on the U documentary. If you don't like people dancing in the end zone, don't let them in the end zone. Well, don't let up a 40-yard run at the end of the game.
Or
You won't
or
get in
don't
the end
don't
zone.
onside kick,
Yeah,
indicating you still are trying to win the game.
yeah. Which was a weird onside kick because their last drive was 7 minutes and 15 seconds, and you went for two. So it was like, yeah, we're still in the game, and he made it a two-score game. This is a game Indiana, like we said last week, TJ. What's the score that IU needs to stay in it against Ohio State? I don't know if they got it last week. What's the score this week that Indiana needs to get to have enough style points to feel like,
Right.
okay, I don't think anybody's ever going to, with IU football, feel like, hey, they're going to give us the benefit that we're safe. But what is the comfortable number that you think IU needs to put up?
I think two things are what the committee will be looking for. I think one is going to be to see if the offense can get back into rhythm and leave a good final impression on offense. Because I think if they struggle on offense again, it would be easy to say for the committee, well, in your last three games, really, maybe they'll just say, hey, after Curtis Rourke's injury, your offense wasn't quite the same, something like that.
Are you
I think they'll
saying
be looking at that.
Joey Galloway is correct? They should have benched him.
No, no. Um, I think you're looking at that, and I think that they will be looking at that just final raw outcome. There's probably a lot of other games that they'll be watching ahead of Indiana Purdue, but um, I would say that Indiana winning this game, um, 24 plus feels like minimum. Um, and I think if you can get it above the spread of 28, then you feel good. But I do think outside of just a set number for Indiana, I think putting up numbers on offense and then just getting a little bit of help elsewhere is going to be the difference for Indiana,
Yeah,
which sounds kind of bad because it does sort of feel like Indiana controlling their destiny is gone. Um, now, there's enough things that it is still far more likely than not that IU makes the playoff, in my opinion. I think that it is still far more mathematically likely that IU makes the playoff than it is that they miss, but there are realistic scenarios where they miss.
yeah.
Um,
So, I mean, if you look at the common opponents that IU's had with Purdue that are in the playoff, which is Ohio State, Penn State, Notre Dame, and Oregon,
well,
and I'm sure the committee is going to look
yeah,
at that.
I don't think we're reaching that Oregon or the Notre Dame one. That was
Notre Dame
ugh.
won 66-7. Um, Oregon won 35 nothing in a ho hum game.
Yeah,
Ohio State won 45 nothing. Penn State won 49-10.
yeah,
So it's got to be somewhere between 66 nothing and 35 nothing.
yeah,
In terms of because that I mean that's the easy data point, right? Is
yeah.
like, look,
I do
if
think
you
that gives
beat,
some leeway for it being a rivalry. I do. Where I
but
think that
is 31-10 going to be enough? No.
what else happens elsewhere, you know?
Yeah, right. 31-10, and you're hoping that somebody else loses that you need to lose.
Yeah,
If IU wins 56-3,
right.
you're probably good. Like, hey, the Ohio State game was a blip. They beat up on this team just like everybody else. They deserve to be in.
Well, yeah,
Um,
yeah, and you could just say, if you're the committee, you could say, well, we think Ohio State is the best team in the country or the second best team in the country.
yeah,
So, yeah, that says more about Ohio State than it does Indiana.
yeah,
You know, yeah, I think that your bare minimum for what you would say that was a good day would be like a 24-28, depending on how it goes. Um, Margin above
yeah.
that, and you start to feel better. But I think that the results elsewhere are going to do more to Indiana's fate than whether IU wins this game by 28 or 38.
Yeah. Let's get into predictions, TJ.
Yeah. So I think that there are legitimate concerns about Indiana's offense right now. Um, I do think that those concerns are valid after what we've seen. However, I have faith in this offensive coaching staff, the players that are on offense, and I have faith that Purdue's defense is decidedly not Ohio State or Michigan.
Hmm.
I think Indiana's offense gets back on track. I think they run the ball, oh, excuse me, nearly at will. I think over 5 yards a carry for sure. And I think that Indiana will find some big plays in the passing game. So I'm going to go with I think Purdue has enough offensive talent to put up a couple of scoring drives. So I'm going to go Purdue gets 14, but Indiana puts up 49. So 49-14, Indiana wins. Um, I think that Purdue will get aggressive on some, fourth downs where otherwise they might punt and give Indiana some short fields that they'll be able to capitalize on for short field touchdowns.
Yeah, I think Sig and staff have heard all the noise, and that style points do matter,
Sure.
and um, they're gonna do whatever they can to make this score in their favor. It's also another team that you called out during your opening week in Bloomington.
Right.
It's a rival. You want to set the tone in the rivalry, and he's going to put his foot down. And I don't see him taking it off like he did against Maryland or UCLA, um, or even heck, even Nebraska, or Northwestern and stuff like that. So I'm going to take Indiana 56. I'll give Purdue the sad field goal. 56-3. I think you feel pretty comfortable. The bucket returns to Bloomington. You feel pretty good, and you hold your breath for Sunday and see where you land and see where these other games land, and then go into championship week. Now, IU still has a shot at the Big Ten title game. But you need a minor miracle.
Yeah.
Michigan has to beat Ohio State, and Maryland, who's 1-7, needs to beat Penn State
In
uh,
Happy Valley.
in Happy Valley. So we'll see. Penn State could have lost to Minnesota last week. Didn't Minnesota? They held on, but that's the path to the Big Ten title game. But I think, yeah, I'm going to go 56-3 IU over Purdue. The bucket returns. They set the tone for the rivalry. Whether or not Ryan Walters is here past Saturday, we'll
Right.
see. But it's time to get some style points. I think they do that on Saturday. So awesome. Thanks for listening. Happy Thanksgiving, TJ. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody listening out there. You can follow us on Twitter at Hoosier_Huddle, on Blue Sky, which is kind of like the old Twitter. If you're tired of all the crap on X, Blue Sky is at Hoosier Huddle. We didn't need an underscore. And then, like, rate, subscribe. Kickoff is at 7 p.m. on FS1. If you're not in Bloomington, watch it on TV. If you're in Bloomington, I suggest going to the games. Hopefully, the dorms are open. Hopefully, the students get there and all that stuff. But it is a sold out bucket game under the lights for the first time in history, uh, Indiana Purdue. So it's
Yeah,
a
that's
great way
cool.
to
It should
end the
be
year.
fun. And obviously, this historic season, and I am very happy, very joyful with this season, very thankful for this season. It's been a blast. Very sad that this is the last regular season weekend of college football. That will be bittersweet for sure. Of course, we have conference championship games, bowl season, playoff, a lot more to look forward to, but still, just one more full weekend slate. So soak it up, enjoy it. Hopefully, everybody gets to have fun with family and friends, and we appreciate you. We are thankful for you, listener and reader of Hoosier Huddle. We'll continue to do our best to cover what has been an awesome season, no matter how it ends up.
Yeah, of course, this is the regular season finale for IU. They will have a postseason game, whether it's in the college football playoff or in the bowl season bowls. We'll see, but that's the fun of the sport, and enjoy it. It's the last regular season full week, and yeah, go IU, beat Purdue.
Be Purdue.